Welcome to the Hiding in Plain Sight podcast, where we explore the transformative power of inclusivity and the strength found in vulnerability. I'm your host, Lindsey Mazza, and with each episode, together we will go on a journey of reconnecting with all parts of ourselves to foster healing and inspire a more inclusive and compassionate world for all. So grab your headphones and settle in for soul-fulfilling discussions that will make you laugh, provoke thought, and be the catalyst for growth. Let's dive in. Welcome back, everyone, to the Hiding in Plain Sight podcast. Today, we have Deborah Kasowski as our guest. I'm so excited to have her on. Deborah is the charismatic host of the thought-provoking podcast, The Millionaire Woman Show. She's committed to enriching the leadership potential of her countless clients, essentially guiding them to go within to capitalize on their true personal power so that they can achieve the measurable success they desire in business and in life. After graduating with distinction, having earned a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, this award-winning 3-time best-selling author, past contributor to Forbes Coaches Council, multiple TEDx speaker, and certified executive coach spent many years as a clinical manager, excelling in leadership development before founding Deborah Kasowski International, a world-class training and consulting venture focused on helping aspiring business owners and solopreneurs develop the winning success habits that transform human potential into sustainable profits. Welcome, Deborah.
Hello, Lindsey. So good to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to chat and dive into all of these fantastic accolades that you have earned through so much hard work, I'm sure.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it has been a journey, that's for sure.
Yeah. So tell us how, well, first of all, how long were you in nursing before you decided
Nearly
to shift?
30 years.
Wow.
Yeah, nearly 30 years.
And were you always thinking that there was something more to do out there?
Yeah, well, you know where it really got, the entrepreneurial part of it really got triggered one time when a friend of mine invited me to a luncheon. And it was a luncheon with eWomen Network, and Sandra Yancey, the head of CEO of that group, was here visiting. And as I walked into the room, you know, coming from a healthcare, I'm used to scrubs, being in the hospital or being in the office where I was working in teletriage. But as I was walking into the room, I watched all these people embracing, talking about their business. There was this, you know, this ambiance and rush of energy. And as I was sitting there, I was watching these people interact, and I'm like, I need a piece of this. I need a piece of this. And then Sandra started reading a children's book. She read the children's book, The Engine That Could. And I don't know if I remember hearing that story years ago, but when she finished, I'm like, it was a she engine who got the toys over the mountain to the kids. You know, so all of a sudden, all these women are so empowered in this room. And I'm like sitting there and I'm like, we don't get excited like this in the hospital. We don't get excited like this in healthcare. I need to have, it just drew me into this space of wanting to be amongst people who had different ideas. Because in healthcare, it has its purpose.
Of course.
But I wanted a piece of this other energy that I thought, okay, I need to find out how I can fit this into my life. And that's where it kind of started from.
And how long ago was that for you?
Oh, that was, gosh, it's going to be at least 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
10, 11, 12 years ago. I did a lot of things off the side of my desk. I learned how to podcast. I've been podcasting for, you know, almost, under a decade, but 8.5 years. And a lot of the things that I learned were self-taught. I went to conferences, I connected with people, went to networking groups, things that I never had done prior to. And, you know, I took some training with executive coaching and started learning more and more. And before the pandemic, a few years before the pandemic, I was going to jump straight in. And But everybody in my world wasn't on board with that. So it gave a little bit of a delay. And
Mhm.
then I had a medical condition show up in my life post COVID. And it forced me to do what I loved because I could still do what I loved. And that's the most ironic thing of the whole process of the 2 years that I've been on the health journey and healing is no matter what, I still got to do what I loved. And that was to be a coach and to speak on stages and to support people. So that was the best part because now I can fully immerse myself into where I want to go and how I can serve people.
Oh, I love that. So, how long, when did you decide to leave healthcare?
Just this year, actually. It
Wow.
was
So you
just this
did.
year that I finally, we had a discussion about, what to do about my recovery. And I wasn't 100% there yet to feel confident enough. And they weren't confident enough to say that, you're going to be successful. So I sat back and really reflected. And I thought, if I want anything to happen for me, I need to be an advocate like yourself to speak on my
Mhm.
behalf. And it was time to take my whole life and career in my own hands. And yeah, it's been already a journey of a few months to really dive in deeper. And it's been an incredible ride, and I've enjoyed every minute of it.
So I mean, it's crazy to me that you juggled and managed both worlds for so long because certainly, like you said, healthcare, there's a place for healthcare. Of course there is.
Yeah.
But the worlds are so polarized. So take us through how you were able to balance the two because the energy in both places is so different, I imagine.
Yes. Yes, it is. And for years, when I was in one space, I wouldn't talk about the other space.
Mm,
Um, I think there was fear of would you see me as credible if I still had a job? And
right.
now that I've been along the journey, I'm like, no, I'm paying my bills. Have my family. I have other dreams. So I was doing what was needed at that time for me, and for my children were small, and I had the flexibility. I wasn't working full time. In healthcare,
Mhm.
I had the opportunity to work on a part time basis and build my business at the same time. And I was able to, when the kids would go to bed, I would stay up late. I would stay up till midnight, sometimes till 2 in the morning, because I was so excited about what I was doing. I would shoot videos in my living room and, started my YouTube channel. I would interview guests for the podcast and started writing articles. And it was when you just block time off. You carve the time into your schedule for what you want to do. It's like kind of like that self-care. If you don't put it in the calendar, it doesn't happen.
Right. Right. And it's
Yeah.
also having the perspective to know that it's not I have to do this, it's I
Mm,
get to.
yeah.
And when you're doing it from a place of joy, then it doesn't feel like a chore,
Yeah.
right? So you
Yeah.
make time for it because it becomes really important to you.
Yeah. And what I've learned is I also wanted to think of myself as a role model for my children, right?
Mm,
That mom's, even though she's mom to you, that she's still a woman who has goals and dreams, that wants to achieve great things and also leave a legacy. And the
right.
biggest thing that they've witnessed is, how we can serve others. And as they grow in now in their careers, because now they're in their 20s, I have this reminder that says, remember, you're here to serve. No matter
Mhm.
what goal you're after, what is the impact that you're going to leave for people to really know? And my daughter, when she was in kindergarten, she got this book called Miss Rumphius by Barbara Cooney. And Miss Rumphius was a lady who used to sit at her grandfather's feet and listen to him tell stories of his adventures and travel and how he settled by the sea. And he would be reading these stories and sharing these stories with these children all the time, sitting at his lap, at his feet. And she would say, "Grandpa, I'm going to be just like you when I grow up." And he's like, "That's all well and good, Alice, but you must make the world better than you found it."
Oh.
So she eventually, travels and hurts her back and ends up bedridden over a winter, and finds was laying and watching in the spring as the flowers came up, and there was some lupins. And she got up, got the seed catalog, and she purchased a whole bunch of lupins. And then what she would do is she put them in her satchel, and she'd go through the ditches and around the countryside and spread these seeds. So eventually these lupins grew everywhere. And she became known as the Lupin Lady because she left the world better than she found it. And then kids would come and start listening to her tell her stories of her travels.
Oh, what a
So
beautiful
it's kind of
story.
been an inspiration for me. Like in June, after I had resigned and dived in, I went to Nova Scotia and went and traveled around there and came across all the lupins, bought myself some lupin seeds because I want to be able to have that as my metaphor, my reminder to make sure that the world's a better place. And that's what I instill in my children is, what is it that you're going to do to have a legacy in whatever you're doing? It could be a job. It might not be your full career, but knowing that whatever place you find it, that you can leave it a little bit better by your presence and what you contribute.
So beautiful. And I think that people underestimate their own impact in the world and on other people. I
Yeah.
think that often we cannot can operate from a place of, well, how much impact am I making if it's just one act or it's helping one person. And when you're able to zoom out and realize the domino effect of all of that, and
Mm.
that it actually does impact the collective. So just do it with one kind act at a time.
Yeah.
Give a person a compliment when you run into them in the store. It can just be really simple acts that make the world of a difference for people.
Yeah. I don't know it off the top of my head, but there's a story called the Starfish Story, where there's a whole bunch of starfish on the beach, and this little girl comes up and throws a starfish into the water, and someone says to her, "Well, look at all the starfish. How is that going to make a difference?" And she
Mm,
says, "Well, it made a difference to that one."
yeah.
And what I've learned, even when I've been at speaking events, and sometimes you think, well, people are going to come up and speak to you after. And this was really early when I was in my speaking, and I couldn't understand. I'd have one or two come and say something, and then the rest wouldn't say anything. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
wow, maybe I don't got this right. And I was talking to someone, and they said, Deb, half the audience is introverted. They're never going to come up to you. Half the other group is extroverted, and they may come up to you, not always guaranteed, but the one who does, and they share with you their story of why it resonated with them, that's the one that matters,
Yes.
because it took a lot of courage for them to come and speak with you, to share their own story of why it was so valuable. And ever since then, I've never been concerned about whether people come up or not, because sometimes people have to ruminate over the message you've shared, and they will be sharing it at their kitchen table.
Yes.
So it will go on, and it will matter to that one.
Yeah, and it ultimately doesn't matter. Um, Even if nobody in the room heard what you had to say,
Mhm.
because ultimately, when you're living from a place of service and authenticity,
Yeah.
you're walking into those rooms for you, knowing that you are showing up in the best version of you.
Yeah.
And that can be hard to do because I think wired to look for external validation,
Yeah.
and that's the coolest part about stepping into your calling is
Yeah.
you stop looking for that external validation
Yeah.
because it doesn't matter.
That is so true. And, it's not a business example, but when I was running my first marathon in training, I was listening to a podcast with Tony Robbins and
Mm-hmm.
Siri Lindley, who I admire, a triathlete. She didn't know how to swim before she started and all of these different things. And she was sharing her journey because she became a world champion triathlete and then a triathlon coach. And she said she was, competing and achieving, and always looking for that external validation. Well, here I am listening to this podcast as I'm running, and all of a sudden I stop dead in my tracks and I'm like, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I've signed up for the marathon and I'm not telling anyone except for a few close girlfriends who were going to be at that same race. And the night before, I got a message from someone and said, aren't you going to tell your family? And I'm like, oh, I guess I could tell them now. So I had told my daughter while we were at supper the night before, doing that carb load, having the spaghetti and all that.
Yeah.
And then I had phoned and left a message for the rest of my family. And I said, but they were all sleeping. They were doing an event and they were exhausted. They had already went to sleep and one's phone went dead.
Mm.
So I left this message that I have a confession to make, and I didn't leave anything else with that. So the next day, when I was 7 miles into my marathon, I get this message back that says, confess what? I said, I'm running a marathon. I'm 7K in. And
Wow.
I didn't tell them purposely because I didn't want the person to say, hey, shouldn't you be running? Are you sure you should be eating that? And all this external stuff. Because I was doing this race for me. And there were times where I've done races and nobody was at the finish line. And I used to be so disappointed. And then after hearing Siri Lindley speak about her need for validation, I was like, okay, I don't need it. I need to give it to myself. So this marathon was that gift to myself of, you are doing this for you.
Yes.
And I am not a fast runner. I was one of the last people to come in, but there was this lonely volunteer with no one around. It's almost exactly how I envisioned it. And he was standing there with the medal, whispering to my friend, saying, is this her first one? And she's like, yeah. And then he leans in and he whispers in my ear, he goes, can I give you a hug? And I
Oh,
said, sure. So he puts the medal on, gives me a hug, and he goes, it was a long way, wasn't it?
aw.
And in that moment, I validated myself beyond anything that anyone could have ever given me.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that as much as I would have loved them to be there, that this one had to be for me. That I don't need to wait for other people to go after the goals and dreams. I can go after it because it's something that I need internally for myself. And
Yes.
it was a big shift in how I approach everything now. Because if you wait for all the ducks to line up or have everybody on board, you would never take any action.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's two really important lessons in that. One is when you stop looking for external validation and you can give it to yourself, that's when you truly step into your full power. And two is when you're on that journey to step into your power, be careful who you share things with.
Yes.
Be- because it's the external chatter can really impact your energy
Mhm.
and throw you off course. So, and I think we're again wired to share all of these things. I mean, social media has us wired to be posting every little thing that we're doing, looking for that external validation. But so many people then get knocked off course because they're not getting it, right? So it's really important to be careful when you share these things and if you even have to.
Exactly. Exactly. But it's probably one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done.
Yeah, I bet. And it was all for you.
Yeah.
Nobody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did the Millionaire Woman show come to be?
Well, the name of the show was grandfathered per se. I ran a networking group for about 3 years called the Millionaire Woman Club, where we gathered women together and there was a guest speaker every
Okay.
month. And then I was doing some entrepreneurial work with a company, and I was sitting in the audience of one of their conferences, and I was in the back row listening to this gentleman walk across the stage, telling us all about how he can teach us how to start a podcast. And in
Mm,
8 weeks, he would have me up and running. And as I was listening to him, my mind was like, "Ah, I can do that. I'm going to give myself 30 days. So I told my virtual assistant, I said, here, this is our mission 30 days. This is what we're going to do. I researched, I found a gentleman named Dave Jackson of the School of Podcasting. I did all the steps that he had on his website, and then I
mm-hmm.
hired him for an hour of consulting. And I said, I want you to go through everything that we've already done and tell us if there's anything we're missing. And the only thing we had to do is we had to tweak the artwork because they had changed the sizing of the artwork. And then he just gave the recommendation, have at least 10 podcasts in the hopper, because once people get a taste of you, they're going to want to binge you. And
Yes.
we have not looked back since. So
Oh,
we're 503 episodes as of this week, and 8.5 years, and it's been a phenomenal ride. The Millionaire Woman Show is all about life, leadership, and business lessons, principles that help you live rich from the inside out. And one of the richnesses is I get to meet incredible people like yourself, because we have you on coming up on the show as well.
mm-hmm.
And I've had publishers reach out to me, send me books so I can read them ahead of time, interview phenomenal people who are doing phenomenal work. So I get to serve in another way, which makes me excited to put people's messages and missions out in the world.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful energy exchange, isn't it? Because
Yes.
you're I'm sure you leave your conversations feeling energized, right? Instead of that depleted feeling when we're engaging in things that aren't properly serving us or others. It's such an injection of joy being able to have those inspirational conversations.
Whenever I finish a conversation, I am just like lit up for the rest of
Yeah.
the day. And it carries on because then I start talking to others, right? Start
Yeah.
saying, hey, you need to listen to this episode because I know it's applicable to you, or it's something that we've discussed in the past. And that's the great thing about podcasts is, when you go networking in the past, it used to be like you'd follow up maybe with an article and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, based on what we discussed or something you shared with me, or this would be a magazine of interest to you. Well, now we can share podcast episodes, we can share reels, we can share stories and say, hey, you know what? I came across this in my feed. It jumps off the conversation we just had. And how relevant is it? So that you can continue to build and nurture the relationships.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I'm sure you get the feedback all the time that people are inspired by something you've said or it's really impacted their lives. And often it's probably a surprise, right? Sometimes you just say things off the cuff and it's like, "Oh,
Mhm.
that's the piece that landed, not that brilliant other thought that
Yeah.
that came out of my mouth."
I've some of the feedback that I've received has truly blown me away.
Mm,
I've had people say, talk to people that I know. And then it comes back to me through my friends, even that says, someone was in a really dark time and they listened to the podcast and it changed something in their lives.
mhm,
I've had someone say, that guest that you had, it really inspired me to take action on this. I've have a girlfriend that she was out for Christmas mass and had one of her friends come running at her and say, "Oh my gosh, you're friends with that millionaire woman lady that I listened to her podcast." And I'm like so
Yes.
honored that it is meaningful to them, that the messages that I get to share and showcase of others has made a difference in their lives. And it's really important to me to be able to share these stories, because stories are what help us come out of a place of isolation. Because often we think we're the only ones going through our situation, when the person right next to us might be having it playing in their head, but they're never going to share it with you.
Yeah. Yeah. It really helps everybody connect.
Mm-hmm.
So was there, because the title of my podcast is Hiding in Plain Sight, and that was inspired by my life's journey,
Mm-hmm.
and realizing that I was hiding such important parts of myself. And it wasn't until I was able to face those parts that I could step into this journey. And I'm just wondering, for you,
Yeah.
were were there parts of yourself that you would say you were hiding?
Along the journey, yeah. Like I said, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't tell anyone I was a nurse. And now when I tell people, I've moved on from nursing, that they'll be like, whoa, wait a minute. I didn't even know that you knew that. And, at the time I was worried that it wouldn't give me the credibility, but I've learned now that it has given even more credibility to them knowing my values, to what I
Yes.
stand for, and my deep caring. I think the parts that I thought about hiding, especially, I'm sure people watching or listening, you might not hear it as you're listening, but I've developed an eye condition that's very rare post having my vaccine and having COVID a week apart, that has impacted my life. And at first I was like, so do I do video anymore for my podcast?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to hide it because first of all, when you're going through it and you don't know what the heck's going on, it's pretty scary. So I didn't know if I was ready to share with anybody because I couldn't understand it myself.
Yeah.
Now that I have kind of a better sense of what the landscape looks like, you know, um, I made a decision very early on that this is where I'm on my journey. And if it makes people uncomfortable, then they're not my people.
Right.
But also to know that when things happen to us, we don't need to hide. We need to be able to say, this is where I'm at, and I'm not letting something define me or stop me, and I'm not living into a label. And that
Mm-hmm.
was really important to me, because as I go on this healing journey, um, and, to the point of, alleviating any symptoms of eye spasms, because that's tend to see what happens, is that I truly can stay who I am, and who I stay true to myself. Right.
Right.
And I thought, okay, maybe I'll just do audio. They won't miss the video part. And here I had been working so hard on building the YouTube channel. And I was like, so why would you do that?
Right.
It's not about how you look, it's about the message you're here to share.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me, it was only a few months, maybe. I think I paused for a short time just because I wanted to get a handle on what was going on. And, everybody around me was wanting me to conserve my energy because it was very fatiguing in the beginning. I didn't know what was going on. Couldn't be exposed to any light. I was sleeping in my basement in darkness, wearing sunglasses, because any light that came into my eyes would spasm and close. So I've come a long way from where it
Wow.
started to where I am today. Still on the journey, but nobody could turn lights on in my house. And now I can sit in front of a ring light and have the light above. And I couldn't do that for months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So would you say that you had to be ready to see yourself
Yeah.
with these differences before you could continue filming?
Yeah, because I became so self-conscious.
Yeah.
We were at an event, it's called Taste of Edmonton, where you go and get samples of different foods from all over the restaurants, right? And the first time we went, when it was just really fresh, when the eyes just started, randomly closing on their own, and didn't wear sunglasses that day, I think, and my daughter was helping me, just walk along so I wouldn't bump into anybody. And she goes, Mom, people are staring at you. And I said, you know what? Let them stare.
Yeah.
But I can educate them if they want to ask me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the place I came from. Because people will look, people will wonder what's going on. Some might have compassion and empathy, and some might just think, oh my gosh, what's going on with her? But it came to a place where I had to accept myself, to know that I'm not any less because my eyes have changed. I am not any less beautiful or smart or brilliant than I was before. It's just I'm showing up in a different way that I couldn't understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as I've gone through this journey, I have a group of friends that we do stairs every Saturday for a half hour. And every Saturday, I still show up. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not as fast, but I show up and I climb those stairs every Saturday.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a metaphor. Like, do you stop doing what you enjoy doing? Or is there a way that if you have to adjust the course that you can still do things that you're capable of? Like there's things that I'm not doing right now, like going for a road bike, unless I have someone with me. I don't want to
Yeah.
hit the ditch. But honestly, Lindsay, I've still walked half marathons.
Yeah, I think that's amazing, and I think it's really amazing that it's provided you with a new perspective as somebody that existed in the world without an obvious physical difference, and
Mm-hmm.
witnessing what that was like. So I'm sure, I mean, I can't imagine that you were ever a person that lacked compassion, but I'm sure it just heightened that compassion for you and really taught you. And I mean, and it's something that I've had to learn, that your body's really the least interesting thing about you. And
Mm-hmm.
we put so much importance on our physical appearance.
Yeah.
And that message is reaffirmed when you're going out
Mm-hmm.
in the world and you have unkind people staring and gesturing and talking. Um, but it makes you brave to keep showing up, and then you actually stop caring, right? It's like let
Yeah.
them stare,
Yeah.
because their life perspective is so narrow, and you're just out there changing everybody's
Yeah.
perspectives.
There was when I was in I think it was grade three or
Mm-hmm.
grade four, there was a classmate of mine who had burns to her neck.
Okay.
And people would shun her. People would not, you know, they would either tease her. And I remember, bringing her candy, hanging out with her.
Mm-hmm.
And, I never, at that time, I never thought anything of it. Right. And years later, I ran into her. She was working in a store and I was there with my children. And she looked at me and she asked me my name, and I saw her name tag and I'm like, no way. We haven't seen
Mm-hmm.
each other in years. And she turned to my kids and she said, I want to tell you who your mother is.
Oh,
Sorry, I can feel
I'm
it
gonna start
here.
crying.
And, as a kid, I was friends with everybody. But I
Mm-hmm.
learned later as she was sharing that how meaningful that was to
Mm-hmm.
have someone in your corner.
Yeah.
And I think in my nursing career, I've worked with so many individuals who, some had no limbs, some had limbs, all kinds of things, or they had burns or disfigurements or like whatever it was. The conversations I got to have with them, the stories they shared with me, that's what connected us.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about their outside appearance that attracted me to their story.
Right.
I've connected with 98-year-olds who were sharing with me that they were so excited that they couldn't believe that they missed the man that was without clothing in their room last night because they were in the bathroom. And I'm like, wait a minute. you know? So whether it be age, whether it be a disability, like to me, it's that personal connection. It is truly about the humanistic piece of us that connects us all.
Yeah. And but it's also really important, I think, for people to understand that moving through the world with just that blanket kindness, like from a young age, you
Hmm.
were kind to that classmate, and I'm sure you've raised your children the same way. And we need to do more of that, though, because
Yeah.
that story shouldn't bring tears to my eyes, but it does because it's rare.
Yeah.
And that's part of the mission that I'm on, is to make it more of a common occurrence and to
Yeah.
help people think outside the box and to task parents and teachers with the responsibility of showing their children how to be kind by
Hmm.
example, because kids are not at their core malicious. They
Yeah.
are witnessing what's going on around them. And I
Mhm.
don't think that there's enough conversation with parents and teachers on diversity and how
Mhm.
everybody's different and looks different, and
Yeah.
that we just need to wrap our arms around everyone and make them
Yeah.
feel included.
Yeah. Because we never know what someone's going through, right?
Exactly.
And, whether it can be something that's going on at home, like especially for kids, but we need to be attentive. We need to let people know that they're seen, how we feel them. We feel their
Mm-hmm.
hearts of where they are at and who they want to become and where their struggles are. Like if I know that there's something that I can do to help support someone who's in a place of struggle, I'm going to want to help them.
Of
And I think
course.
it's human nature to help, but I think somewhere along the way, as people grow up or groups of friends or who they're socialized with, there's often, these little pieces of disconnection. And I think it's about reconnecting people to what matters.
Yes. Yeah. One one podcast episode at a time, right,
That's
Deborah?
true. One at
Right.
a time.
Run
We're
at a
on a
time.
mission.
That's right. The web of connections that come from it is just, it's really, really cool.
Yes, most
Yeah.
definitely. Most definitely. Yes.
So do you want to just tell us a little bit about like your books and how you're on this continued goal to help people, and how they can find all the ways that they
Oh,
can tap
sure.
into all of your amazing lessons and qualities.
Sure, absolutely. So, like the first book that I wrote is co-authored with Charmaine Hammond. It was called GPS Your Best Life. And it was really when we were in our own personal development phase and building into it. We both had done Jack Canfield's program that he had on coaching success principles. And that's where it kind of ignited from. Once that book was done, I was connecting with the publisher and I'm like, you know what? I kind of want something for myself
Yeah.
to showcase what I do. And it led to the Entrepreneurial Mom's Guide to Growing a Business, Raising a Family, and Creating a Life You Love,
Mm.
so that moms could know that you can create this amazing life for yourself with intention. Now, that book it's getting ready to be revised. I'm going to dive into it and do those tweaks to it. And then the third book, I decided that I was going to self-publish.
Mm.
I wanted to understand how it worked. And I was working with a coach one day and I'm like, can't let them be curious. Let them understand what's going on. People should ask more questions. And I got into this little bit of a rant and she looks at me and she goes, that's the name of your book. I was like,
Yes.
let's be curious. Yeah, it is about that.
Mm-hmm.
Because often when we have misunderstandings, or we get into kind of that self defeat. And it was brought to my attention today when someone says, well, what did I do wrong? It's not necessarily that you did something wrong, but can you be curious about what came up and how did it affect the other person?
Right.
right? Because obviously they're bringing it up to you because it impacted them versus going to a place of what did I do wrong? Because you have to go from the place that's what was their interpretation of the situation.
Right.
So what I've come to learn, when we ask the right questions, we get better answers, and then we can create from that. We can
Yes.
strengthen relationships. We can create projects and courses and, podcasts
Mm-hmm.
that really help people move through this journey of life.
Yeah. It's the constant curiosity. I mean, you and I
Yeah.
talked about this
Mhm.
before. You had asked me what is a skill that I would say has led to my success. And I said to you, it's that I'm always learning. I'm always
Yeah.
wanting to be a better version of myself and researching all the things and being
Yeah.
constantly curious. And I think that if people operate from that perspective, then you're less inclined to be immediately defensive, right? You want to
Yes.
know how you can wake up a
Yeah.
different version of yourself
Yeah.
tomorrow.
And to me, that curiosity is a solution for so many things. And
Yes.
knowing that when you ask the first question, it doesn't mean that you ask one and done. It's that
Right.
you ask and you have an opportunity to ask more.
Right.
And staying in the place of curiosity, using questions more so in the what and how,
Mm-hmm.
and getting rid of the why. Because the why questions are the ones that put people on the defensive. It's like, well, why did you do that? And why did you do this? And that's what triggers people to move into that place of defense. So it's really about using the how and the what to really gain an understanding, and then really moving into that place of appreciation. Because
Yeah.
really everything, when you come from a place of appreciation and gratitude, you can shift the world.
It's so true. It's so simple yet so complicated, right?
Absolutely, it is.
Right. We hear
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
words thrown around all the time, and it's really hard to master it and know that you're coming from a genuine place, and to be able
Mhm.
to return to it, because life's hard, right? I think I like to remind people of that. Yeah, we're talking on these episodes of all of the wonderful things we've done and the adversities we faced, but it hasn't been an easy road. it's
Yeah.
the it's having that comeback rate, right, of picking yourself up and continuing to move forward.
And I think my biggest learning, Lindsay, is yeah, life it can be hard, but we can
Mm-hmm.
do hard things. And what's hard for me might not be hard for you. You might be like, "Oh, that's a cakewalk. Why is it hard for her?" Well, it's hard for me.
Right.
But for another person, that they might have a different hard. So it's whatever challenges that we face, they might be hard. However, those are the most memorable. Those are the most meaningful things because you discover who you are in the process and what you're capable of. And
Yes.
sometimes I think staying in that comfort zone is where we avoid some of those hard things, even though deep down we know that that might be the next best step for us.
Yes. Yes. Oh, well, where can people find you, Deborah?
Well, my books are on Amazon, so that's where you
Okay.
can find the books. But my website is www.deborahkasowski.com. There, when you put in your email address, there is a 10-page document called Reset Your Mindset. So if you want to grab that, it is yours for the taking. And grab a listen to the Millionaire Woman Show podcast. It
Yes.
is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, Google Play, wherever your favorite podcasting is. And you can find me there, as well as my social media handles at Deborah Kasowski. And I would love to connect.
Well, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Lindsay. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining me on the Hiding in Plain Sight podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And please take a moment to subscribe and leave a review. Feedback and episode ideas helps us reach more listeners. I would love to connect with you further. You can visit my website at lindseymazza.com and add me on Instagram at LindseyDMazza. Until next time, keep sharing your stories and vulnerabilities, because one story at a time connects us all.